Mr. Churchill.
Thank you, President Schultz. The Parks and Recreation Committee has 3 items on the agenda tonight. Item 4 is to amend Section 5 of Ordinance 3609, and what that is we're authorizing to change hours from one summer employee to another. The reason why that is Kathy Premer sent a letter to the mayor. This is where this came from, and it reads, "I'm requesting a transfer of hours from one summer help employee to another. One employee has become working weekends only due to his football schedule. This reduces his hours to 16 hours per pay period and will leave extra hours that could be used for another employee. As the ordinances work presently, the hours cannot be transferred until an employee is no longer working. Since we know he will not use all these allotted time, I'd like to be able to use these extra hours." And all this does is adjust the legislation to allow that to happen. And since this is kind of pressing, I'd like to make a motion at the proper time we waive the 3 reading rule. That's item 4. Item 16 is to accept and appropriate $1,800 donated by Sam's Club. As you all know, Parks and Rec is dependent on a lot of these donations. And they've been going on for years, and there are more and more donations coming in to us, and really appreciate it because our income is kind of sparse at this particular time. This funds are going to be donated by Sam's to be used by the city for the grand opening of the skateboard competition at the skateboard park. That the competition will not cost you taxpayers anything, of course, because of entry fees and donations by Sam's Club. And since that will happen fairly soon, I will waive the 3 reading rule on this one also. Request that anyhow. Item 27 is the deer legislation. And that with the police chief and the game warden, seems as though that only 12 deer were recorded killed within the city limits last year as a result of being hunted by bow and arrow hunters. However, the police chief and the game warden believe that there were many more killed as a result of the hunting within the city limits. We have to get our hunters to tell where they've gotten the prey, and that's not a huge problem because they are being taken. Thing is, deer season opens on September 26th, less than 2 weeks away. The police chief called me the other day and he said he's being inundated with calls about when the season is going to start. Until this legislation is passed, we cannot issue the permits to hunt. There's a few changes. For example, this year they will be allowed to hunt on weekends where they were not allowed last year. The reason for that is because of the fact that they were hunting after 4 o'clock anyhow, and the season it's difficult for a person to take off work to deer hunt. If we opened it up on weekends, it'd be allowed to do that. We're getting closer to an infestation with deer every day. There are more and more. We still have a huge problem with our locals feeding deer, forcing the deer to become dependent on human beings for their livelihood. We need to stop. The deer are wild animals. They know how to feed themselves. Most of them do anyhow. So at the proper time, at the appropriate time, I will request that we waive the 3 reading rule on this one also. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, President Schultz. The Human Resource Committee has 3 items on the agenda tonight. Number 1 is a second reading to authorize a no-cost contract with the National Church Residencies to provide service coordinator services. I think this is going to be a very, very nice benefit to the city and to many of our residents within the city, and certainly it's nice when it comes at no cost. Item number 6 is to ratify the agreement between the city and the FOP, the First Capitol Lodge, number 59. And at the appropriate time, I will ask that we waive the 3 read rule so we can get the record keeping and bookkeeping underway, since this is a binding agreement. The city basically has no choice but to ratify it. And item number 24, which is a companion with item number 23, to authorize the pickup of the PES for the employees and for the retirement. So since when we do that, I would also ask to waive the rules so we can get all this bookkeeping underway before the end of the year. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Other committee reports, Mrs. Lester?
President Schultz, City Service has one item on the agenda tonight, and we're asking authorization to have an auction of surplus city property, including property in the possession of the police department. And I would appreciate it if we could pass this ordinance, and because they have things that they have collected and homes that have been repossessed, and they would like to get rid of this. So, thank you, President Schultz.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Henderson?
Thank you, President Schultz. The Finance Committee has a number of items on tonight's agenda. I distributed to all of council a copy of our committee minutes from August 31st. And it states the actions that were in that meeting, and then I would like to specifically mention some disposal of assignments. I believe I mentioned assignment 308 concerning the air conditioning request for municipal court building, that the Judge Street has asked that that be withdrawn and considered in the budget for 2010. But additionally, Council Assignment 343, that was to appropriate $5,000 for tornado sirens in the city. After checking with the auditor's office, we ask that that be withdrawn and be forwarded to the Ross County Emergency Management. It is our understanding that the EMA for the county maintains and is responsible for all the sirens city county-wide. And so that invoice is being forwarded to them. And then a lot of the assignments from that committee have made it to the agenda. Item number 3 is an annual ordinance that's usually around this time of year at first reading, and I would ask that we're going to waive 3 tonight. This allows the city auditor to transfer already appropriated dollars between the salaries and the fringes column within those funds. So it stays within that department, but if the balance in the column between the fringes and the salaries vary, they can just cross that over without doing an additional appropriation. This is effective only through year end, and I believe we passed this one last year around September 22nd. So we need to be doing that so that we can keep the payroll going. Item number 7, at first reading, is an ordinance. It's a housekeeping item to amend Ordinance 6909 regarding the temporary clerk for the police department. As council will recall, we passed that ordinance and we had expected that the clerk would begin the job August 1 in the police department due to a pending maternity leave, but she actually started 1 week earlier. So we need to amend that ordinance to reflect the true date that that clerk began. And I would ask that we waive the rule tonight to keep our bookkeeping appropriate. Item number 8 is the missing final $3,025 feasibility study invoice payable to Dan Marsh for the feasibility study of 95 East Main Street. We had done half of it before, and that was the part of the expense, I believe, for the one-stop shop assessment, and then we had an additional invoice that has come to council. It is past due, and I would ask that we waive that, and that does close out the studies of feasibility study for East Main.